Hi, boys and girls. I apologize.
It says, okay.
Hi, boys and girls. I apologize. I have been absent for 2 days. What a hectic 2 days. I am going to be reading chapters 6 and 7. Remember, this is Flat Stanley's Worldwide Adventures, book number 2, and it is the Great Egyptian Grave Robbery. So keep in mind that Stanley has gone into the tomb, and we know that chapter 6 is called A Bad Surprise. So we've been kind of anticipating what's going to happen. Stanley closed the tomb's door behind him and set off, following the hieroglyphs at every branch. Before long, he came to another button on the wall, just like the one in the tomb. He pressed it, and once again a large panel, a huge block of stone, swung open. Stanley stepped outside into the fresh air. So we can see the picture. Sir Hawara and his guards came rushing over when they saw Stanley. "Well?" Sir Hawara demanded, hopping on one foot and then another. "The scrolls?" "I found them," Stanley told him. Suddenly, he felt quite proud. He had located the priceless giant scrolls of papyrus. And now he was safely outside in the warm sunshine. It had all been worth it. "And I found the passageway out. There are lots of branches in the passageway, but all you have to do is follow the black hieroglyphs to get out." "Excellent!" Sir Hawara rubbed his hands together. "I must get the crew ready. Meet me back here in the morning. At daybreak, we take the scrolls." He climbed onto his camel and rode away, leaving Stanley bewildered. Just then he felt a tug at his shirt. He turned to find Amisi there glaring at him. "That's who you've been working with? That's the worst looter of Egyptian treasures in the country. My father and I have been trying to catch him red-handed for years. I guess I was wrong about you." And she stomped off. Stanley didn't know what to think. He climbed back onto his camel and followed Sir Hawara's party back to the bazaar. He was going to find out just what was going on. Back at Sir Hawara's headquarters, henchmen were everywhere. So, have we heard the word henchman before? Henchman is another word for kind of like a bad guy. So Sir Hawara is a bad guy. They call him a looter, which means taking things that don't belong to you. And a lot of times they're very expensive, worth a lot of money, or very valuable. And so henchmen are kind of like bad guys' helpers. So there were henchmen everywhere. Stanley eased himself into the shadows and sneaked around to the back. He lifted the tent flap and peeked inside. It was even darker and smokier than before. Stanley took a deep breath of nice, fresh outside air. Then, using the limberness he had developed by slipping under his bedroom door at home, Stanley slipped under the flap. Sir Hawara was on his cushion, talking in a low voice. Cautiously, Stanley crept closer so he could hear. "What's that? In the shadows?" A guard jumped up, pointing toward Stanley. There was no place to hide. Stanley plastered himself against a large container standing upright behind him and froze. "It's nothing," said Sir Hawara, clapping his hands for silence. "Just the sarcophagus. It's a very realistic painting on the cover. Quite a find. Now, pay attention to my plans." Stanley held himself perfectly still and listened keenly. There's a word, keenly. Do we know what that might mean? So listening keenly means listening carefully. "Tomorrow, we send the flat boy into the tomb to unlock it for us. We take the scrolls, pack them onto a plane I will have waiting. We'll be out of there before anyone is the wiser. These scrolls will fetch a fortune. I'll be rich, rich, rich. And the beauty of it is that no one will know they even existed." Okay, so here he is, and he doesn't realize it, but Stanley is listening to this. So Amisi was right. They were looters who were sneakier than the worst sneak thieves, and Stanley was helping them steal one of Egypt's greatest treasures. Stanley peeled himself off the sarcophagus quietly and slid back under the tent. Then he made his way to the National Historical Museum and climbed the steps. The least he could do was admit to Amisi and her father what he had done. The entryway was crowded with tourists. Immediately, Stanley found himself squashed in the center of a particularly careless group. After a moment, though, a tangle of arms and cameras, he saw Amisi and her father come in. They passed right by him. What about a very light bulletin board, he heard Amisi's father say. What about a map? I don't think so, Father, Amisi replied. Besides, I think that bulletin board flattened his brains. Wait till I tell you what I just found out. Stanley worked himself free from the crowd and hurried after Amisi and her father. He caught up with them at the curator's office and called out. Amisi turned and frowned at him. Then she slammed the door shut. Somehow, Stanley felt even flatter than before, as flat as the hieroglyph painted on the wall beside him. And then he had an idea that just might work. Stanley ran to the main desk and scribbled a note. Please give this to the curator, he said. It's urgent. Thank you very much. Then he went back to the Antiquities Bazaar, planning his plan. The sky was growing dark. Stanley let himself into the camel's pen, and there he made a bed for himself by placing a stack of saddle blankets on a mound of straw and then layering himself into the stack. He closed his eyes, remembering that his parents insisted he and Arthur get a good night's sleep every evening. Suddenly, Stanley missed his family very much. He wondered what they'd been doing while he'd been gone. Were they playing Monopoly? Looking at pictures of their last family vacation to Mount Rushmore? Without him? Stanley's stomach grumbled with hunger. What had his family had for dinner that night? Meatloaf and mashed potatoes, his favorite? With apple crisp for dessert, maybe? Beside him, a camel grunted and snorted. If he were at home, Arthur would be sleeping in the bed next to him right now. Arthur sometimes grunted and snorted in his sleep too, but Arthur smelled better than a camel, thought Stanley fondly as he fell asleep. So that was the end of chapter 6. Chapter 7 is Sneaky Plans. The next morning, Stanley awoke to more hand clapping. Sir Hawara was gathering his crew outside the camel's pen. Stanley lay between his blankets, thinking he had just about enough of all that hand clapping. He wondered why someone hadn't told Sir Hawara how rude it was. As Stanley lay there thinking, he wasn't paying attention. So take a look. It's making me wonder. He didn't notice that one of Sir Hawara's henchmen had come in to the pen. The man grabbed the stack of blankets Stanley was lying in and started piling them on the camels. Before Stanley could scramble out, the guard threw a saddle over the blankets and helped Sir Hawara onto it. So just as the sun was rising, Sir Hawara and a large group of his men took off for the Pyramid of Kufaful, with Stanley along for the ride. So now we know why there was little eyeballs in that stack. If I hadn't been flattened already, Stanley thought, this would do the trick. As they rode along, Sir Hawara continued to discuss his sneaky plan with his men. With each thing he overheard, Stanley felt worse. We'll take everything, not just the scrolls. We'll pick that tomb clean as a lamb chop bone. Speaking of lamb chop bones, what about the flat boy? Stanley heard someone ask. He knows about the scrolls. What if he tells on us? Don't worry about him, Sir Hawara answered. Once he's unlocked the tomb, we don't need him anymore. We'll just seal him up in there. He could rot in that tomb for eternity with the mummies, and no one will ever know. Locked inside the tomb with the mummies, to rot for eternity? How he would miss his family. How he would miss his friends at school. Even the mean ones like Emma Weeks. Stanley hoped that Amisi's father had gotten the note. The caravan stopped at the base of the pyramid, and everyone hurried off. So be thinking, it sounds like Stanley left him a note. We don't know exactly what the note said. So if we think about it, good readers always sort of think ahead. So are we predicting something that maybe he left this note for Amisi's father? He's really hoping Amisi's father gets the note. So we're thinking and wondering, wonder what was in that note. Stanley worked his way out from under the blankets and followed them around to the back of the pyramid. Oh, there you are, Sir Hawara said, handing him a torch. Now, just like last time, open the door from inside for us. Got it? Stanley nodded, took the torch, and squeezed himself into the narrow slot. He worked his way along the passageway as quickly as he could and re-entered the tomb. Inside, he stopped at the base of the pharaoh's coffin. Try not to worry, he said out loud. If my plan goes well, they won't be gone for long. Stanley felt a little silly talking to a statue. But in the gloom, it almost looked as if the statue were smiling back at him. Stanley pressed the button again, unlocking the tomb. And there, waiting in the main passageway, were Sir Hawara and his men, laden with carts and boxes. Stanley put on his biggest smile as the crew rushed in. Just remember, follow the hieroglyphs to get out. And that is the end of chapter 7. So next time we will read chapter 8 called The Hieroglyph. I hope you're all doing well, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.